Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this week's weekly wrap. It's the 17th of July. I'm Luke Harris, and I'm joined by Anthony and Mirko. My first week back after a couple of weeks off. Gentlemen, nice to see you didn't burn down the office. Anthony, how you going?
Very well, Luke. Nice to see you back from your trip across the waters.
Across the ditch, as we say, mate, across the ditch. And what about you, young Mick? How are you, buddy?
I think I detect a slight accent, Anthony. Has he picked up a bit of a Kiwi accent in the 2 weeks he's been there?
You are an idiot.
How was your trip, mate? Did you have a good time?
Mate, the trip was good. We do need New Zealand to. New Zealand feels like a really big Tasmania. So that's what it feels like. So I think we should just inherit it. It should just come a part of us, make life a lot easier, I think, for everyone. New Zealand is magnificent, great country, great wines, great people. Their economy is struggling, however, mate.
Yeah, I have heard that, and it's a bit of a playbook. We talked about this New Zealand and what happened with their property market, and we run the risk of similar sort of outcomes here with the way that and a lot of it stemmed from the CGT changes that they made over there too.
Absolutely. Look, there is a touch of monkey see, monkey do, and you just got to be a bit careful on that one. So, yeah, one of those ones, mate. But look, it's been a massive week, as always, and despite being away, and I enjoyed listening to you boys whilst I was away. But Merky, give us a quick market update.
Yeah, for sure. So, looking at the week that we've had so far, just a quick look at the Aussie market. Opened an hour ago. We're off about 0.76. Down about 0.39 for the week as it stands now. Over in the US, the S&P 500 is off about 0.5%. Nasdaq has sort of bounced back a little bit, up 1.5 nearly for the week so far. But there's definitely a sort of a switch to sort of more fundamental type investing where people are sort of perhaps moving a little bit more out of the AI space and the like. And looking at different organisations, which probably explains why we're sort of still seeing this. Is the AI scenario fair income? Is it real? Are we backing the right horse, so to speak, here? And probably a good time to sort of mention we spoke about the SpaceX float a couple of weeks ago as well. That's actually now trading below its IPO price. I think it closed last night at $131. It floated at $135, which sort of gets me thinking as well, because it's traded as high as $225. Yeah, and as we know, the markets require buyers and sellers. So someone did buy it at $225, and they're off 40% right now. So I think that we're starting to sort of see people look through some of these companies and sort of saying, are the earnings real? Don't talk to me about total addressable markets. Talk to me about revenues. And so I think we'll see a little bit more of that coming through. To be honest.
Mind you, with the SpaceX thing, we're all impacted by that, given that index funds are now being exposed to that stock. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So it's in the Nasdaq index already, and there is a delay before it finds itself into the other broader indexes, but that will be the case as well. So that can actually be quite a big driver when those volumes start coming through.
I just think that prospectus was one of the greatest readings of all time. So I'm looking forward to pulling that out in 3 to 5 years to see how that goes.
Yeah, well, that's right. And I mean, it was because it was such a hot stock. It was actually hard to get your hands on. So a lot of people did have to pay an inflated price to get into the stock, and they may be licking their wounds for some time to come. And there's been some fund managers, and there's been some certainly some heroes that sort of managed to get their hands on the stock because of their connections and their size that offloaded. And then there's been a couple of funds that have openly also said that we intend to hang on to the stock, and now look like they have a bit of egg on their faces. So, you've got to be careful when you're playing in this space with these sort of market caps.
Absolutely. And given that we were talking about housing before at the intro there, Anthony, I might go across to you. We've seen that the buyers have hit the brakes in the last month, with mortgage demand down 14% in June. And we've seen that first home buyers are down 17%, which is actually the largest fall in over 4 years. confidence is clearly weakening. I guess your thoughts as to reasons why?
Clearly, the government initiatives haven't worked. So, look, talking to a few brokers and lenders, there's definitely the last 2 or 3 months, they've said the volume of activity on their books is large, but the volume that actually gets through to lending is significantly reduced. So those numbers are just reinforcing that. So you're actually seeing that on the ground. So, and a lot of that's across residential, but also investments dried up significantly. I think the only thing driving the desire for people to have investment property is effectively the drop dead deadlines that exist around SMSF borrowing and CGT and negative gearing. So, look, that doesn't surprise me, particularly across the residential space.
I was talking to one of the brokers that we do a bit of work with, and he was saying that, well, about a month ago, he had 20 pre-approved loans sitting there ready to go for people to sort of deploy capital. And he was saying of those 20, 17 of them have basically said, I'm out, don't worry about it. We won't, no bother renewing the additional 90 days or whatever the bank is willing to give on pre-approval. So, yeah, I think people are just becoming a little bit more cautious. Having said that, the clearance rates were a bit better. They're actually up first time in 3 weeks over the weekend. That could be a scenario of perhaps less properties coming on the market, and perhaps vendor expectations starting to come off a little bit too.
Yeah, look. I think it's really important that we preface this. We're not seeing a housing crash per se, but there's definitely some uncertainty that caused by the budget, the tax uncertainty. There's also housing affordability, which still remains an issue. So despite the fact that we've seen some softening in prices, the gap between being able to still buy versus prices coming down is still wide. There was an interesting article earlier this week, Mirko, where they were saying that 61% of Australians were happy with property prices coming down. Now, I don't know who the paper's been speaking to, but I haven't met anyone that said that's a good idea.
Yeah, the survey that I conducted didn't end up with that. And forget about the investment side of things. The reality is that the property cycle, where it's at, gives people the comfort of how wealthy they feel, regardless of whether you're transacting or not. If you believe that your property prices are stable, if they're going up, you feel wealthier, you feel more confident to make decisions. And I don't know where that number came from, but I find it very hard to believe.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I guess just for both of you, is this a sign of more things to come, or is it just a question of just it's okay, this is just a normal part of the process that we're going through at the moment? What do you think?
I think we're going to continue to see a bit more of this, particularly through in Victoria through this winter period. It's always a bit slower, and Victoria is not attractive from an investment opportunity perspective generally. So I think in this state, we're definitely going to see this continue through to the end of the year, in my opinion.
Fair point. What about you, Nick?
Yeah, I think it gets worse before it gets better. And, remember, springtime is when people have this inherent belief that that's the time to sell your property and the like. That's going to be a lot more stock on the market at that point in time. At the moment, there's still not an oversupply of stock. Wait till that sort of starts coming online. I think we see a little bit more of the same, to be honest.
Okay. All right. Well, that was a discussion on residential. Interestingly enough, there was a bit of a reality check on the commercial side of things. So this week in Melbourne, we saw a major property developer, Lendlease, sell a building for half the price it purchased it for 4 years ago. So I think they sold it for about 83 million. So at half the price, that was 160 odd. That's a pretty big hit. You could argue and say that's not a correction. Yeah, it is. Thoughts, boys?
Not surprised at all. I mean, particularly here in Melbourne, had interesting coffee with a friend this morning who sits on the executive team of a listed company, and the number was something like we're struggling to get 20% of the people to be in the office. And that just seems to be the case. And the reality is that you can build all these amazing buildings, but if you don't have people to fill them, that's a problem.
Yeah, Oh, I think that's right. I could give you multiple examples of where we've seen clients with investments or exposure to office-related buildings, not just uh, Melbourne, across the country, and effectively those syndications or funds effectively being extended on the basis of we can't get the price we need to meet the prospectus requirements. So effectively, they just keep dragging on, and that ain't getting any better. So that's yeah, there's multiple examples of that, and it comes down to fundamentals, like we mentioned from the start. It's a case of everyone thought property would go up. You buy the building for 60, you do some improvements, and effectively it becomes 105, 6, 7 years' time, and you sell it. Well, that's not the case anymore, because occupancy is a key factor, and the work from home thing is real. So office is, in my opinion, on the nose in the CBD.
Absolutely, absolutely. How much more challenging is it going to be for Victoria, which has now passed that legislation? So, as of September, working from home 2 days a week is actually mandated from that point of view, and that doesn't apply to small businesses, but it applies to larger organisations. If anything, this is going to compound the problem rather than help that sector recover anytime soon.
I
I
agree.
think, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, it's funny to watch this, I guess, and look, it was, one could always argue and say, well, given what prices were, given where they were going, and all that kind of stuff, it was always going to happen. But we've kind of created our own little crisis here all of a sudden, I think, and if we're not careful, this could get a lot worse before it gets better. So that's something to worry about. One thing I think is worth chatting about this week. This week the Albanese government came out with its AI policy, or we shouldn't call it a policy, we should call it more a paper, a discussion paper. And the biggest takeaway from that was that, according to Albanese, AI is no longer just about technology. It's about productivity, it's about national security, it's about economic competitiveness. And one of the challenges for the Australian people and the Australian nation and the Australian government is, how do we actually link into this AI story, given that we're not at the forefront when it comes to producing this technology, but we are at the forefront when it comes to being a data center. And, if I hear more discussions around data centers and why they're so great and so on, yeah, they're great. We can build these data centers, but all they do is suck up resources, i.e. energy, water, and the like, but they don't actually provide an economic dividend to the country per se. We've all had a bit of a read of what Albanese did say. What do you think the challenges are for Australia, and are we actually addressing what is a very real issue, I dare say?
Well, it looks like the government's finally woken up and realised that AI may not be just a passing fad. I'd love to know what the Office of AI, I think they called it, actually looks like. It'll be more about the office fit out than anything else. Look, it's certainly an issue. We have become a destination point, like you said, Luke, of data centers from some of the biggest players globally. And you always sort of think back and say, yes, that's a good thing, but has it been on the right pretenses, and what other pressures does that put on our economy, on our resources, which are stretched as it is? Yeah, we already have some of the highest power prices in the world as it is. We don't want to compound that problem as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I guess from that point of view, the risk for Australia is that we are just viewed as data center specific, and the problem there is that economic dividend, outside of the initial input that it provides, i.e. people, the construction workers go out and build the facility and all that kind of stuff, and there might be some rental income coming through from that end. There's really not much more value that it provides. The challenge for Australia, I dare say, is owning part of that value chain. Like we want to be part of the value chain prior to the data center, because if we're not getting that benefit, my worry here is a bit like our energy. We've got all this energy, we've got the abundance of stuff, we sell it to somebody else to rebuy it back in. It feels like we're doing that with data centers again, doesn't it?
Well, I think that's right, Luke. I think it's part of it is in respect of what role we're going to play through that process. And I think if a couple of weeks ago we were talking about the Australian market year-to-date or the annual performance versus the US, and predominantly that Australia has lagged mainly because of its AI and tech. There is none. There's nothing major there that's effectively driving the economy. So if we're not going to jump on board and effectively try and, I'm not saying we have to compete with these people, but we actually have to have a solution, because, it's not only an issue with the AI component, but it's effectively, it could be a continual drag on the ASX and the markets for a long time to come.
Yeah, I think you're right, Anthony. And I think, when you think about the government settings, like, the last budget that came through where the government's made some changes to capital gains and the way we tax things and so on, and taking some of the incentive out of the system. And there's an argument for the government doing what they've done. That's not an issue from that point of view, but it feels like they've come late to the party because the world has changed demonstrably. And at the very time where we should be making it easier, given all these moving parts, we're actually making it more harder. And my worry here is that we just become this one big data center or this energy producer that outsources everything and then brings it all back in again. And you kind of think, well, where does Australia fit into this? And I'm not sure that the government has got its thinking cap on properly in relation to this, because look, there's no question that this is the biggest productivity opportunity in decades in terms of what AI can do, and it's industry agnostic in the sense that the impact that it can have on a variety of industries is enormous. But the reality here is, I think, we don't want to be a passenger in this place. I think we want to be playing a more active role, and I'm not sure that we've got the settings in place or the smarts either, which is kind of frightening. Mirko, are you hearing anything on the ground that would give us some confidence?
Yeah, no, I'm just thinking about this as we're sort of talking through it, and I can't help sort of draw the analogy that, there was a time, there still occurs, but not as much as what it used to be, where we would make widgets in the cheapest place to make them, because of labour costs, input costs, and all the rest of it. Australia needs to be very careful that we don't simply become the data center place because we're getting taken advantage of by some of the biggest global players around the place. We actually need to think about how is it that Australia can benefit as a whole, as opposed to the initial, free kick, which may be the selling of the land and the construction of the site and the rest of it. So I think that we need to be very careful about what we see as our role and what the benefits are for Australia out of it.
Absolutely. All right. Well, look, one thing we probably should discuss is the peace deal with Iran, which lasted, albeit, I think, 3 days in terms of the excitement that it was. And on top of that, we also, with the peace deal going kaput, we also then had Donald Trump come up with this novel idea that America was now going to be the custodian of the strait, and they would charge a 20% fee for boats to go through. From that point of view, which lasted for a total of 24 hours before he realised that he was in breach of every international law you could imagine. Are the Americans run by idiots? Forget about the war, but surely to God, there's got to be people in there who are smart who go, actually, before we go and say something, maybe we'll want to look at the rule book before we say it.
I would love to have been a fly on the wall where someone actually had to turn around to President Trump and go, we're not allowed to do that. You actually realise we're not allowed to do that.
The thing that was ironic about that announcement, Mirko, and you scratch your head about this, because it was only 4 months earlier that Marco Rubio was standing there, and when Iran had threatened to impose a toll, that he actually said, you can't do this. It's actually illegal. You can't charge a toll on waterways. Now, I don't know what Trump is thinking. Like, to think that the Strait of Hormuz is CityLink, like, it doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. And I don't mean to be rude, but clearly he's 80. I think the job is beyond him. You think it's time he should step aside and let somebody else take the helm?
He ain't letting go. That's not going to happen.
Yeah. It is.
But he should be relying on his advisors, and that's the issue I see at the background of this, is that, he'll open his mouth and say stupid things, but surely the people sitting behind him have got to be smarter than this.
You'd like to think it, but when you've surrounded yourself with sycophants who are too busy kissing your backside, they're not really giving you the advice that you need. And Trump, unfortunately, he actually needs it. He actually needs the advice. He needs the inputs to go, well, hang on a sec, this is what we can do and can't do. And unfortunately, with Iran, the situation, despite the fact that we were all cheering on the fact that there was a peace deal negotiated and so on, the reality was, as we all agreed, it wasn't a peace deal. It was a memorandum of understanding. Now, a memorandum of understanding is, hey, we commit to having a chat, but we haven't agreed to a brass razzoo. And I think I think the Trump administration has got a lot to answer for, because the world is incredibly unstable and becoming unstable by the minute, I would dare say, and we're nowhere near resolution on this point.
Not at all. Not at all. And this stop start, it's on, it's off again, is actually really bad for the economy. And the big takeaway over the last 12 months has been the concept of inflation, and no one is talking about the lower order effects of all this. And inflation is not just a number, it's actually a psyche as well. So if you believe that prices are going to continue to go up, you behave differently.
Yeah, you do. And Mirko, it's funny you should say all that, because the reality is, within all this, markets have remained relatively calm. And that's the thing that you just kind of sit there and go, how long before the market goes, we've had enough of this crap? Because it's one of those things where you're betting on the fact that this is going to be resolved. You're betting on the fact that this will be fixed and things will be returning back to normal. But you can only kick the can down for so long before you kind of go, well, hang on a sec. 1 + 1 doesn't equal 6 in this situation.
Yeah, and I think that's what we're scratching our heads about, because the fundamentals and the logics in scenarios like this have not sort of been behaving in that manner. Even when you think about sort of the tensions in the Middle East, and one would expect the gold price would be shooting back up. It hasn't actually behaved like that. We kicked off this, and the oil price is arguably lower than it was than when we started, but then it could spike back up again. So the old textbook stuff where you sort of say the playbook looks like this, it doesn't look like this. So we're living in a very strange sort of time on that front.
We are, mate. That we are. Now to the World Cup. The World Cup's been a lot of fun. It's been a lot of fun, and our respective countries are all out. Obviously, Australia unfortunately lost to Egypt from that point of view in a penalty shootout. We've seen the Dutchies leave. We've seen the Croats leave as well. But most importantly, we saw the Poms leave yesterday. Now, I don't want to jump on anyone's grave there, but I must admit I was a little bit excited for the Argies yesterday morning.
Well, it is Australia's arch enemy, and I don't know that there were too many Aussies sort of disappointed to see England have to say, actually, it's not coming home after telling us it's been coming home for quite some time.
Oh, you do feel sorry for the Poms. They are one thing I do give their supporters absolute credit for. They're all in, and they don't hold back. They let you know why they're going to win the World Cup, why they're so wonderful, and they hold their players in such high order from that point of view. And when it goes pear-shaped and they lose, and let's not kid ourselves, yesterday the Poms at the 84th minute mark were leading 1-0. And should never, ever have lost that game and capitulated, absolutely capitulated from that point of view. And Argentina and Lionel Messi, to his credit, the guy is just sensational. And he's 39 years of age. That is just phenomenal, which is just fantastic. To see that happen, and then to see the Brits then turn on themselves, their media, has just been a joy. Do yourself a favour over the weekend. If you're not doing much, grab a shardy, grab a Negroni, grab a wine, grab whatever you want, sit back, watch YouTube, and just have the best time of your life watching commentators absolutely devour what's happened here.
Yeah, the English media do not hold back, and that's one thing that they don't hold back on anything, let alone this type of scenario. This is like a national disaster for them.
Absolutely.
So they've lost their cricket coach during the week. So they sacked Brendan McCallum.
Gone.
And you would think that after the changes that were made post the 70th minute after they scored, you would think this coach is probably in a little bit of trouble too. So maybe Bazball is going to be introduced into soccer.
It wouldn't surprise me. So let's get this clear. They've lost the Ashes. They haven't won the World Cup. They don't have a prime minister. Well, they lost their prime minister as well.
He's got, I think he's got 9 days left, hasn't he?
Yeah. Okay. And there's a country without air conditioning as well. There's not really much what's look in the UK. So yeah, look, it's a bother, mate. Now, Anth, your boys saluted last night. Geelong, they did well.
Yeah, a few changes, a few guys back, a couple of scary injuries though. I think if we're not full strength, I don't think we're going to trouble too many.
Okay. And what about your boys? Nick, I noticed that you're actually in that top 10 thing. You might actually play some finals here.
Yeah, I'm just pre-printing my certificates of participation for for the fans. Yeah, because that's what I don't know why we have a top 10. Let's just everyone should play finals, and there should be no winners and losers, guys. That's how the world should run.
And I couldn't endorse that view anymore. I think we should have a top 18 just to give Essendon a chance.
That's all right. When Tassie come in, you'll be 19 and still won't play.
Shut up, Anthony. Shut up, Anthony. All right, gentlemen. Well, wishing you both, and thanking you for joining me today too, but wishing you both a wonderful, wonderful weekend. To all our wonderful clients out there, thank you as always for all the fun and all the entertainment that you provide. To our wonderful team, thank you for all the wonderful work that you do as well. And until we meet again next week, take care, all the very best, and go Spain. Cheers.
See you, folks.